In 1998, Nokia was the most valuable brand in Europe. Not the most valuable technology company, the most valuable brand of any kind in an entire continent. They controlled 40% of the global mobile phone market. One in every 2 phones sold on Earth was a Nokia. Their phones were indestructible. Their software was industry standard. Their supply chain was the envy of every manufacturer on the planet. And they had already built the smartphone. In 1996, 11 years before the iPhone was announced, Nokia released the Nokia 9000 communicator. A device with a full keyboard, email capability, web browsing, a calendar, a spreadsheet application. It was a smartphone before anyone called it that. By 2007, Nokia had an internal prototype of a touchscreen smartphone with an app store. Before the iPhone launched, before the App Store existed, Nokia had already built it. And then they chose not to release it. This is the story of how the company that invented the future was destroyed by its fear of leaving the present. To understand Nokia's fall, you need to understand what made Nokia great. Nokia began as a paper mill in Finland in 1865. Over the next century, it became a rubber company, then a cable company, then an electronics company, then a television manufacturer. Nokia had reinvented itself completely, multiple times. It was a company that knew how to change. Or so it seemed. In the 1990s, Nokia made a decision that transformed the entire industry. They focused exclusively on mobile phones, sold their other divisions, concentrated all resources on a single product category, and dominated the world. By 2000, Nokia's market capitalization was larger than the entire Finnish economy. A single company worth more than a developed nation's annual output. Management professors Eve Does and Keely Wilson spent years inside Nokia studying its culture for their book Ringtone. What they found was not a company that failed to see the future. It was a company that saw the future clearly and was too afraid to build it. Here is why. Nokia's greatest strength had become its greatest weakness: their hardware. Nokia made the best physical phones in the world, durable, reliable, with battery life that lasted days, with signal quality that competitors could not match. Their entire organization, their supply chain, their manufacturing processes, their performance metrics, their executive bonuses, were all built around the supremacy of hardware. The iPhone changed the game to software, and Nokia's organization was structurally incapable of competing on software terms. When Steve Jobs announced the iPhone in January 2007, Nokia's internal response was dismissive. The battery life was poor, the hardware felt fragile, it had no physical keyboard, the camera was inferior. All of this was true. None of it mattered. Because the iPhone was not competing on Nokia's terms. It was not trying to be the best phone. It was trying to be something Nokia had no category for. A computer in your pocket that also made calls. Nokia's engineers understood this. Nokia's middle managers understood this. The problem was at the top. The research of Dawes and Wilson revealed something that became known in business schools as the Nokia paradox. Inside Nokia, there was widespread awareness of the threat from Apple and later Android. Engineers were building solutions. Product managers were proposing pivots. Middle managers were sending urgent reports up the chain. But the information was not reaching the top in accurate form. Because Nokia's culture had become one of fear. Not fear of competitors. Fear of senior management. Nokia's CEO Olli-Pekka Kallasvuo ran the company with a management style that discouraged bad news. Executives who reported problems were seen as weak. Managers who missed targets were removed. The culture rewarded confidence and optimism regardless of what the data showed. So the bad news was filtered, softened, reframed as manageable challenges before it reached the people who needed to hear it in its full severity. Nokia's board believed the company was adapting well to the smartphone challenge. They were receiving reports that said so. Those reports did not reflect reality. The reality was this: Nokia's smartphone operating system, Symbian, had been designed for the hardware constraints of the early 2000s. It was slow to update, difficult for developers to build apps for, fragmented across dozens of incompatible versions. While Apple built a unified platform that attracted developers, Nokia was managing a software ecosystem that nobody wanted to build for. By 2010, the App Store had 250,000 applications. Nokia's OVI store had a fraction of that, and most of them were poor quality. In 2010, Nokia hired a new CEO, Stephen Elop, a Canadian executive who had come from Microsoft. In February 2011, he sent an internal memo to all Nokia employees that became one of the most discussed documents in business history. He described Nokia as a burning platform. The image was of a man on an oil rig on fire, facing a choice between burning to death or jumping into the freezing ocean. The memo was raw, honest, accurate, and 3 years too late. Elop's solution was to abandon Symbian and partner with Microsoft, adopting Windows Phone as Nokia's operating system. The logic was understandable. Nokia needed a modern platform. Microsoft needed a hardware partner. But the execution was catastrophic. The moment Elop announced Nokia was abandoning Symbian, sales of existing Nokia phones collapsed immediately. Why would you buy a phone running software the company had just announced it was killing? Nokia called this the Osborne effect, announcing your next product before it is ready and destroying sales of your current product in the process. Windows Phone arrived. It was behind Android. It was behind iOS. App developers did not prioritize it. Consumers did not want it. In 2013, Microsoft acquired Nokia's handset division for $7.2 billion. 18 months later, Microsoft wrote off $7.6 billion on the acquisition, more than they paid for it, and laid off 18,000 employees. Nokia, the company that had once been worth more than the Finnish economy, had been sold for parts and written off as a loss. There is a version of this story where Nokia wins, where they release the touchscreen prototype they had built in 2007, where they invest in software with the same intensity they invested in hardware, where the culture allows bad news to travel to the people who need to hear it, where they build the app ecosystem before Apple does. That version was available. The engineers had built it, the product managers had proposed it, the market research had predicted the need for it. But an organization built on hardware dominance, led by people whose careers were built on hardware dominance, rewarding people who delivered hardware metrics, could not reimagine itself as a software company. Nokia did not fail because the future was hidden. Nokia failed because the present was too comfortable for the people at the top to risk destroying it. The burning platform was always on fire. They just could not see it from where they were standing. The question Fall of Giants asks every week is not how did they fall? The question is, at what exact moment did they choose to